This is Bryce on BYU. We are 8-0. No losses yet. BYU has won 8 games in a row to start the season. Holy crap, that is weird to say because I said, I think a couple times recently, I really honestly only thought BYU would be at best. I think the best I thought they could do was 8-4. They've now exceeded that, or they haven't exceeded that, so it's technically possible. But I thought 8-4 would have been like a stretch, and it would have meant like right now they were at like maybe 5 wins on the season, and that they could maybe get 3 of these 4 down the stretch. But that was like the ceiling I had them at, and I think they've got a incredibly good shot at breaking that ceiling. In fact, my wife and I were talking just a little bit ago, and I think BYU, well, actually, no, sorry. What we were saying was, what I told her was that I think BYU has, I think BYU has a really good shot here to make this a really special season. Potentially, no losses maybe, but we have to take it a game at a time, and all this winning has just made me nervous. The other thing my wife and I had talked about that was interesting with this game was BYU is just so good and dominant in this game that it was almost boring in a way. Like not boring like I'm like, boring, more like, yeah, okay, we're winning. It's it's a win. And I think we talked about last week how like it was like, oh my gosh, yes, we won. We won on that last play. And or not on the last play, but on one of the last plays of the game. And it's like, oh, now we're just winning every game. And or now with UCF, it's like we just won. We took care of the ball. We just dominated, and Dylan Risk coming in for UCF made it more interesting, for sure. More interesting than I would have probably hoped for at the end there. But it was never in question beyond like the beginning of the second half. It was not really in question. BYU started this game up 17-0. I think the last time in this game that I was worried about what BYU could do was when BYU was so BYU starts up they start the game 17-0, and then UCF goes to score 10 points, and they're down it's only 17-10, but BYU is able to score on a 62-yard touchdown from Chase Roberts. They're able to make the game 24-10 going into halftime. And from there, BYU was able to then put on some points. They ended up going up after that. They ended up going up 34-10, and then UCF scored a couple of later touchdowns. One with 9 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and then one with a minute left in the fourth quarter. And it made the game a little bit more interesting, but really it was just never really in doubt through a good portion of the second half, and it felt good. But it also, like I said, it was just so like not in question for us. And it's crazy. We were 2.5-point underdogs going to this game. I definitely think Kalani was like, guys, they still don't believe who we are. They still don't believe we are this team. And they showed them. And honestly, BYU just made a case today to potentially jump Iowa State in the rankings. I don't think it'll happen because the rankings just don't ever seem to work in that way, but it's like if some of the voters were to really look at things, they could say, look, BYU just handily beat a team that Iowa State struggled to put away last week. And so I think BYU really has a strong case to be in the top 10, but I never trust the AP voters to do the right thing. And so we'll see. Maybe that's part of what I'll do, because since we're going into a bye week, and we'll get to that in just a sec. But now with going into a bye week, maybe that's one of the things I'll discuss this week is this is where we're at in the AP poll. We're going to be going into this college football playoff next, then the college football playoff rankings next week. Where do they put us? And how does that all, work out, in terms of where BYU is come time for the football game against Utah in a couple weeks. But yeah, it's been an incredible start to the season, but BYU was able to take down UCF and they're 8-0. This is just incredible. BYU just dominated on every side of the ball. Passing, they had 228 passing yards to 198 passing yards for UCF. Jake Retzloff was 16 for 24 on those 228 yards. He averaged 9.5 yards per pass. BYU rushed 252 rushing yards on 51 attempts. That's close to 5 yards per rush. That was one of the big things we talked about in those podcasts last year was BYU needed to average a good 5 yards per rush because they were setting up on a lot of third and shorts, which allowed them to go 7 for 15. Still not incredible, and then they went 2 for 2 on some fourth downs, and so it allowed them to be more efficient than we normally have been getting. And the BYU, because of all those rushes, they dominated in time of possession 40 minutes and 28 seconds to only 19 minutes and 32 seconds. In a way, I would say this is kind of a Whittingham style win in the sense that, we took a lead and we just said, all right, we're just going to hold on to the ball. But the difference was BYU was then taking that heavy time of possession that they had and turning it into points at the end of a lot of those possessions. And so they were able to just put UCF away in a handle. That's why they were able to put them away so handily, was because UCF couldn't match that pace and a lot. And I think in some ways, UCF at the end was able to score a couple times. And I think part of it was because the defense wasn't in any sort of rhythm because the offense just kept holding on to the ball. But BYU's defense showed up. They forced a couple interceptions. And we won the turnover battle 2-1, and UCF, the fumble from Jake Retzloff that UCF recovered, they threw an interception on that next drive, so no points off turnovers, and BYU was just able to dominate in every facet of the game. We had 8 penalties for 50 yards. I think that was one of the things I would have loved to see cleaned up just a little bit was we had, I think, 4 or 5 offsides penalties. It's not what you want to see. It's not. But I think this team had just a certain game plan, and I think that's kind of what drew them off sides was they had a certain game plan drawn up to stop the run, and some of the guys just got a little antsy, but BYU was able to still put it away, and the penalties didn't kill them. They weren't drive killing, and they didn't really do a ton to help UCF on their drives, and so BYU was able to dominate this game in a way that I don't think we've seen. You had, like I said, Jake Retzloff 16 for 24, 228 and 2 touchdowns. You had LJ Martin 15 carries, 101 yards and a touchdown. Hinckley Rapati 13 carries for 83 yards. LJ Martin is looking like the promise. It feels like he's now taking the promise he had from last season and from that first start this year. And he's really starting to convert it into, this is the talented back that we've been looking for at BYU. And he is a guy that we can hand the ball to and say, help us get to victory. Help lead us on the way there. I still do like what we have in the future coming down the tank for BYU. You still got Sione Aimoa and some other guys coming down the tank in terms of, they didn't play tonight, but I think, which I think is because now they're able to, I think they're able to keep their red shirt if they don't play in too many games from here on out. And so I think that's part of what we're doing. And then you're still getting, and you're also just getting a ton of production from Martin and Rapati. And so I think BYU is just able to continue, 252 rushing yards. That's great. I think I mentioned in the pregame, if we were 200 yards or 150 to 200 yards, we would probably win the game by 10, and 252 yards. Yeah, we won by 13. And like I said, that last touchdown from UCF was kind of a garbage time, kind of touchdown. And It was kind of interesting that UCF called the timeout when BYU was just kneeling at the clock, especially since that was their only timeout. It just felt weird, but they were able to take it all and win, and now we go into a bye week undefeated, and I think it's partway through, not this upcoming week, but partway through next week. So I think like 10 days from now, I think it's 10 or 11 days from now, the first college football playoff rankings will come out. And I think that's what we'll talk about during, like I said, during the bye. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the AP poll. We'll just talk about, what does BYU need to do from here on out to continue to push forward and try to get that really special season out and maybe make the college football playoff. And then from there, you never know what happens. But it's one game at a time, and the next game is Utah. And that's a big game for BYU still. And it's bigger than we've ever had it be in a long time because of the independence for all those years. This game means almost as much, at least to me, as 2021 did, because 2021 was, we're not going to let them get to 10. We need to break the streak. We need to show that we can still be a good football team here in the state. And they managed to do it. Sorry. They've managed to show that they are competing in the state of Utah, and right now we're the best school in the state of Utah in terms of our performance. But going into the game, we'll talk about that in the podcast, and probably we'll talk about it a little bit this week in this upcoming week's podcast, and then in the podcast the following week, because we do a preview for the game. I'm just nervous for every game, and it's a rivalry game, so anything can happen. And so BYU, from here on out, they play Utah, and then they go and they play Kansas. They'll host Kansas at home, go to Arizona State, and then finish off the season against Houston. And those are all winnable games. BYU's doing some really good things this year, and they could continue to do some really good things. But next up is Utah, and that's where the focus should be. And I think BYU is going to use the bye week to make sure that any injuries that they do have, that they can continue to manage those injuries. And I know from what I've heard through the Locked On Cougars podcast, Connor Pay is he's hoping to at least be available in the Utah game, but I think he feels that Kansas is the more realistic scenario. He said that both on the Locked On Cougars podcast and on one of the afternoon shows for the sports, the KSL Sports Zone. And so as BYU continues to try to continue their success this season, this bye week comes at a great time, and it allows them to prepare for the rivalry game. And Utah's on a very bad skid, and their offense is looking lost, and hopefully BYU could take advantage of that. But it's gonna be a big game, and it's gonna be a ferocious Utah team that's gonna be looking to salvage something this season, and that is part of what makes me scared. But I think also this is I think going into the season, I didn't love BYU's chances against Utah in this year's rivalry game. I have good feelings about it now, but we gotta, like I said, we gotta take this one game at a time. And like I said, I'll be talking about that in the podcast coming up. But man, we are 8-0, guys. We've got to 8-0, and I'm loving to see what BYU is gonna do as they go on further into the season. And until next time, I hope you guys all just enjoy being 8-0 for a couple weeks, and we'll see how things go as we get into the next set of games. So I'll probably talk to you guys probably Thursday or Friday this week, and we'll get talking about how BYU's doing in the polls and what they should expect for the rankings, and see where BYU can take things from here. And hopefully you guys enjoy the bye week, and hopefully you guys enjoy these podcasts. I appreciate all the support. Give me a like, comment, subscribe if you're on YouTube, and if you're on Spotify, if you give me a follow, give the podcast a 5-star rating. All that really helps. I've enjoyed the bits of support I've gotten so far, and we'll see as we continue this on. I just love talking my passion about BYU. But yeah, we won, and so 8-0. And that's where I'm going to leave it. 8-0. See you, kids.